Welcome to the Unrivaled Man podcast. So excited to have you here once again today. Very excited also to have my guest for today, Larry Hagner. So, Larry, over the last 6 years, Larry has interviewed over 700 experts on his Dad's Edge podcast. It's all about parenting, mindset, patience, communication, intimacy, optimizing health, and the power of community. He is the proud father of 4 energetic boys, the husband of his soulmate, Jessica, for over the past 18 years. And Larry is just one amazing man, husband, and father. So excited to have you on the show, Larry.
What's going on, Clint? Good to be here, my man.
Hey, thank you. Larry, it's great. I've listened to your show over the years, and just got a lot of wonderful insights from the people you've interviewed and from your own story. And and really, as we get started today, I would love for people to hear your unique story.
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it. Yeah, my story is, I guess it's a little different when I've told it. A lot of people are like, "Yeah, that's definitely not the norm." I grew up. As we're recording, I'll be 47 tomorrow. Um,
Oh,
and
well, happy
thank you,
birthday tomorrow.
thank
That's
you.
great.
And
It's my little my 6-year-old will be turning 7
oh,
tomorrow
cool.
as well. So it's a great
Good
birthday.
birthday, good birthday. Yeah. But I grew up. My mom and biological father were married for I think 4 years. They got married like when they were kids. They had me in 1975, and then after a 4-year marriage and being parents for just under a year, they decided to split and get divorced. And from what I understand, I
Mm,
don't know much about it, but I understand that the divorce was pretty bitter. A lot of drama,
mm,
a lot of craziness. As far as like just they were just kids; they weren't ready to be married, and it was a really bitter ending.
mm,
So my dad, I don't know all the details, but he was really just not a part of my life at all. I think he tried to be, but the relationship dynamics at the time it was difficult, and that my mom also had moved from California to St. Louis, so it was making it very hard. And then I just don't. I have no recollection of my dad. And
mm,
remember from being as little as I can remember to 4 years old that it was just me and my mom. And I remember I knew what a dad was because I saw dads come and pick up their kids at preschool, the one preschool that I attended, and so I knew what a dad was, and we
mhm,
didn't have one, but it didn't bother me. Like I mean, there was no pity party or anything like that. Just my
mhm,
interpretation of dads at the time was moms go out and find dads. Like kids miraculously appeared out of
mm,
nowhere, and moms then go out and find a dad. And my mom hadn't found my dad yet, which was fine. And I'll never forget the first
yeah.
time she brought a guy home. This guy walked through the door. She said that she wanted to introduce me to a friend of hers that she had been kind of dating, and I guess it was that time that she wanted to introduce him to me. And I was like, oh my gosh! I was like, that was my first like click. I was like, man, I wonder if she found my dad. Like, I wonder if this guy is the guy, right?
Oh, yeah.
And this guy came walking in my house. I'll never forget this because it was like the first time a real male figure came walking in my house. And he was
Mm,
wearing a 3-piece suit, a trench coat. He had a briefcase. It's 1979. He had like a handlebar mustache, and he was a
oh,
white
yeah.
collar data software engineer. And so he came walking in the house and he shook my hand. And literally the very first question I asked this guy is, "Are you going to be my dad?" Like I just beamed. Like I shook his hand,
Yeah.
and that was the first thing that came out of my mouth. And I just remember it being very awkward. And my mom laughed, I laughed, he laughed, but I think my mom kind of took that as a sign, and she did end up marrying him. I think it was like
Mm,
6 or 9 months later. I think she really kind of took that as a sign, like, wow, like I really do
mm.
need to,
Like, he's already accepted
yeah,
it. He's all
like this
yeah.
guy, like it's
Yeah.
kind of like a Jerry Maguire moment, right, where the kid like hugs Jerry Maguire, and all of a sudden she's like, oh my god, like look at that. But so they stayed married for 6 years. And what I can tell you is that he was very polite, well mannered guy. He was ex military. Like, if anyone ever asked you about him, like, they would be like, oh my gosh, that's like one of the nicest guys in the world. Like, his manners and how he treats people was just
Mm,
off the chart, like, with just kindness. And he was like that until he drank, and he did drink quite a bit. And on the times he did
mm,
drink and my mom drank, they got pretty fights got really, really intense. If there was physical abuse, there was emotional, mental abuse, there was all kinds of things. Like, I mean, I could tell you
Mm,
stories, but I won't. But like, it wasn't uncommon for my mom and him to be in shouting matches or hitting matches, or there were times where I woke up in the
mm.
middle of the night and I would find my mom like pinned down, on her bed. So they would stop fighting. Cops were called to my house a few times by our neighbors. And, it was pretty chaotic, growing up like that. And every year they were married, it just got worse and worse and
Oh man.
worse. And I remember being 10 and they'd finally like split up. It was a really dark year for my dad. He adopted me, so I just viewed him as my dad. He lost his job.
Hmm.
He lived downstairs in our basement and slept on like the cold tile floor with on our patio furniture cushions. And there were times that I would go downstairs in the middle of the day. I'd go down there two, three, four times a day and just put my hands on him and check on him, make sure he was still alive because I was worried he was going to die down there. Like I remember that was my thinking.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
And they ended up splitting up, getting divorced. He moved out, and I really never saw him since I was 10. So I really started to get kind of curious about like, well, where did I come from? Where did
Mm.
I don't understand this. And my mom told me at that point, well, I was married before him, and you actually have a real father. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? She showed me like
Yeah.
the wedding album, and I was like, oh my gosh, like the first time I actually saw my dad in photos, and I was like, wow, this is crazy. I kind of look like him a little bit, and so I became really curious about him. Well, a couple of years passed by. I'm 12 years old, and I go up to our local rec center to play basketball with a friend of mine, where I actually ran into my father. Well, I ran into his wife actually, which is kind of a really interesting story. I usually just say father just to cut the time out of it, but I ran into his wife, and I didn't even know that was his wife until I
Hmm.
heard one of the employees at the rec center say her name, and I knew what my dad's full name was, and he said her first and last name, and I was like, wow, that's kind of odd. I was like, what are the chances? So I just walk up to this lady, being a bold 12-year-old, and I'm like, hey, I was like, what's your name? And she told me, and I was like,
Yeah.
are you married to a guy named Larry? Because that's my name too. And she's like, yeah, I I am. And I was like, huh. I was like, this sounds kind of weird. I was like, but I think your husband might be my
Yes.
dad. And you just saw it click for her right away. She looked at me, she goes,
Oh my
are you
goodness.
Larry? Because she had obviously heard about me. And I'm like, yeah, I am. And she goes, yep, I am. She goes, would you like to talk to your dad? And I was like, oh, yeah, I would love to. So we went around the corner. She put a quarter in the payphone. She's like, hey, I'm up here at the rec center. I ran into your 12-year-old son. He'd like to talk to
Oh
you.
my gosh.
She just handed the phone right over.
Uh,
And I talked to him,
yeah.
and it was very surreal. I don't remember what we said. I just remember the tone in his voice was like shock, just like, oh my gosh, like he didn't know what to say, and neither did I. But we decided after that, like, she's like, hey, would you like to meet him like in face to face? I'm like, yeah, I would. I went home, told my mom. She wasn't happy about it, but she let me meet him. So he was remarried at the time to this woman. He had a 2-year-old son, another one on the way.
Mm.
And we had like this relationship for about 6 months. I was so excited. I was calling him dad, like right out of the gate, like, spending time with your biological father. You come to my little league games, all this stuff.
Oh my
And I would spend the
gosh.
night at their
That's so
house. They only
close.
live 3 miles from where we live. So it's kind of cool. Yeah. So it was probably right around month 5. The last month that we started hanging out,
Mm.
I noticed there was a lot of stress and heaviness with my dad, but I couldn't pinpoint it. I mean, you're
Exactly.
12 years old, you feel it, but you don't know how to talk about it, right? And I'll never forget, the best way I can describe it is think of a woman that you've dated in the past and she's not into you
Oh
anymore,
my
but she hasn't
goodness.
told you yet, but you know it's coming. That's about the feeling it was. And I remember picking up the phone one day and I called him and I was like, hey man, like I haven't heard from you in a while. Like I just kind of get this feeling something's not right. Is everything okay? Well, that turned into a conversation
Mm.
where we then ended the relationship. And I don't even remember why, to be honest. I just remember I think that there was a lot of strain, a lot of tension, a lot of stress
Mm.
that he was experiencing trying to balance both things going on. And, I think it was a lot for him. Um,
Mm.
so we ended things and it did not sit well with me and ended up gaining a lot of weight. My mom ended up dating a bunch of different dudes. She got married again. She got married total
Mm.
3 times by the time I was 18. And she dated just these complete and total crazy men, that they were the same typical guy that she
Mm.
was always with. They were partiers, they were drinkers, they were abusive, they had anger issues. So that was my world. That's kind of how I experienced fatherhood. Was half of it was spent without a father figure, and the other half was spent with these dudes who were just kind of going in and out of this revolving door. And then so I fell into like this really deep
Mm.
depression. I failed the 8th grade, had to do 8th grade twice. Ended up getting into a
Mm.
really good, actually, high school the second go around. Went away to college, graduated college, started my career. Well, fast forward till I'm 30. And this is where the story kind of like ends and
Oh yeah.
begins. Just definitely a big chapter, right? Um, so I'm in a Starbucks here in St. Louis. I'm there for a business meeting. At the time, I was in medical device sales, and I had a Monday morning business team meeting every Monday morning at the Starbucks. And I'm sitting there with my team, and I look over,
Oh
and
man.
who came walking in for his morning coffee with my father. And my dad's a very successful business owner, entrepreneur in the electrical business, and came in to get his morning coffee. And
Oh
I'm like,
man.
still remember what he's wearing. And he's wearing like this yellow collared shirt with these khakis and just came walking in. I was like, oh my God, that's my dad. I know exactly who that is. Well, one of the women that we were with was also a good friend of mine. And she's like, are you still here? Hello, we're meeting, like, hey. And I'm like, yeah. I was like, sorry. I was like, kind of weird. I was like, my dad just walked in. She's like, I'm sorry, what? I was like, my dad just walked in for, I guess, his coffee. And she's like your dad, like your
Okay, so yeah, she
dad.
oh
And she
gosh.
she and I have been friends, so she knew the story. And she's like the guy from when you were 12. I'm like, yeah, that's him. She goes, where is he? And I said, he's right there. She's like, what are you gonna go say? I was like, nothing. I was like, there's nothing really to say. I was like, well, I'm 30 years old. I'm married. I'm about ready to have my
Yeah.
first
In your
kid. There's
mind, he'd
really
already made it
not
pretty clear, right? Years
much for
ago.
me to
It's like
say.
it's done. Yeah.
She, yeah, yeah, it's done. So she took it upon herself to just get up and go sit next to him. And I was like, didn't even say a word about it. She didn't even was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go talk to him for you." Nothing like that. She just got up and went over to him. I was like, "Oh my God, what is she doing?" Sat down next to him. They're about 50 feet away. I couldn't hear him, but I could
Mm.
read his lips, and I saw him say, "Where is he?" And he started like looking around. Our eyes met, and he just like came over, shook my hand, and I
Mm.
was just like, "What is about to happen?" And he's like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And I'm like, "Fine. How are you?" And like I wasn't nice,
Yeah.
but I wasn't a total jerk either. I was kind of like right in the middle. And we talked for a few minutes. He's like, we should really get together, for coffee or something. And I'm like, if you want. I was like, here's my card if you want to contact me. And the next day, I got this email that was
Mm.
really long, basically pouring his heart out. We ended up meeting for breakfast. That turned into a dinner with me, my wife, and his wife. And then that turned into a lunch with me, my wife, his wife, and then my two
Oh
younger
wow.
half brothers. And now it's been 17 years. And we've got a great relationship. I have a great relationship with especially my youngest brother. Great relationship with my dad. He's still married to the same woman, 40 plus years. And
Mm.
we've just decided that the past was the past
Yeah.
and that was it. But here's where Dad Edge really got started. Dad Edge got started about 5 years later because at the time I was raising a 6 year old and a 4 year old. Oh, I'm sorry, 6 years later. And
Hmm.
I was your typical guy that we help now. Like I was just struggling with patience. I was pouring a lot of my time into my career. I had a mediocre marriage. I really wanted to connect with Jessica on a high level. I just didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to connect with my kids. It's just like I thought all these things like, okay, here's a laundry list of what not to do. And I know all these things because I experienced them. But what I realized quickly was that that's about as effective as you going to Lowe's, buying a brand new barbecue pit, and then opening up the instruction manual and it says, here's
Exactly.
100 ways not to put this together,
Good luck.
but figure out the rest. And I was just, and so, right. Dad Edge really got started because I had this super dark moment with my 4 year old who's 14
Mm.
now, where he stepped out of line and I spanked him. And I always swore to myself because I was raised with a very heavy hand, a lot of abusive guys. I'm never going to put my hands on my kids in anger. And I did. And unfortunately, I did it. I
Mm.
hit him so hard that he hit the ground. And I didn't mean to do that. And it was awful. So I go to pick him up because I realized right away what I just did. And he looked at me in absolute
Mm.
terror. Like he shuddered actually when I went to help him up. And I was like, oh my God, like, what am I doing? And it was in that moment I went into my office and felt like I was
Mhm.
destroyed. It was probably one of the darkest, lowest points I've ever been. And I just remember going on social media on Facebook because I
Yeah.
didn't want to think about what I just did. So I just wanted to distract myself. And I'm a big believer in God and faith and divine intervention. And I feel like sometimes God gives you a nudge, right? And I saw
Mm,
this button in the lower left hand corner. It said create a page. I had never created a page, but I clicked that button and the thing came up. What do you want to name your
mm,
page? And I don't know what it was, tears in my eyes and everything. I
yeah.
just, the Good Dad Project, just clicked it. Right. And I never did that for a following. In fact, I was the Good Dad Project. I was like, if I need to figure this out, I need to learn just like anything else. And so I
Mm,
created that page only because I wanted like a record of what I was learning. And that was
mm.
like, I'm going to go out and learn one new thing every day. I'm going to post it here and just keep a record of it for myself. That turned into a following and then being asked to speak, which blew my mind because like, I was like, what do you want me to speak about? I'm an idiot, you know? And then that turned into a blog in 2013 and 2015 started the podcast. And I mean, here we are 7 years later. And if you would have told me that this is what it was going to turn into, I would have
You're like,
laughed.
who
I would have
who am I
thought
to
you
do
were
this, right?
joking.
It's like
But that is what it's turned into. All right. Still, I think that, but you know, it's been such a great learning. So it's been the best education that I could possibly imagine. And I have a fantastic marriage now, and I have for years. My wife and I are getting ready to celebrate 19 years. I have four great boys. Not every day is sunshine and rainbows, but it is good, and it is a lot better than what the alternative was. I
Mhm,
guarantee you, I was headed for divorce. I guarantee you, I'd have two boys instead of four. I'd be seeing my boys 50% of the time. They probably wouldn't like me. I probably would have
mhm,
a wife or an ex-wife that didn't like me at all. I'd probably be on to my next second or third
mm.
marriage at this point. Like it would have been disastrous.
That's
So it's
amazing.
helped a
That's
ton. I
amazing.
can tell you that.
Like you said, it sounds like you are a believer in God, and I am as well, in that we are led to those type of things, and it feels like Good Dad
Yeah.
Project, and now Dad Edge was God leading you along the way to do this for yourself and for so many other men out there. That's an incredible story.
Thank you. Yeah, he's definitely a forgiving God. That is for sure.
Which is what, you bring that up, and I appreciate you bringing that up, and being a forgiving God, because I I know that there are people listening right now that have either, they think that where they're at with their children or with their family, that there's no way to turn back or to fix it wherever they're at, right, wherever they're at. And God is there for us, and he'll help us and help lead us, and help us know what we need to do in our world. And perhaps your story will help, give someone that little motivation, knowing, okay, I could be my own project, right?
That's right.
Take the next step.
That's right.
So
Yeah, just be a student, just learn, right?
I love it. I love it. Well, what a wonderful story. What else is getting you excited right now in your business and life?
So the most exciting thing I think that is coming is it's a book that I wrote called The Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood. And I've been working on it for a year. And the launch date is supposed to be September 20th, although the publisher that I was going with filed bankruptcy. So unfortunately, that put it on hold. But I had
Life always throws you
it
curveballs.
does. I had another publisher like literally swoop right in. They said, basically like, hey, we want it, and I'm supposed to get an offer either today or tomorrow. But I think the launch date is still going to be in September. This will be my fourth book, and this is the one that I wrote a couple of children's books, for dads to read to their kids. One is on like how a dad will always love and protect their kid no matter what, no matter what the kid
Mhm,
even does, right? So it's a great story to read to your kids especially when they're little. Another one I wrote
love
is
that.
on screen time, the good, the bad, and the ugly, which, basically I've had a lot of experts come on the podcast and talk about the effects of mental and emotional things that happen to kids when there's too much screen
Mhm,
time and basically different and better ways you can spend your time. But also balancing screens as well, but being very aware of what
mhm,
they do. And then I wrote the Dad Edge, which is I wrote that one in 2015. That was my first book. It was like 27,000 words and it was 9 chapters long. And it basically just gives you like literally like the bare elementary basics of the things that I was learning at the time. But Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood, this is the big one. It's divided up into four
mhm,
parts. It's got current state, like what men face. It's everything to be the husband you want to be. So if you want like more intimacy, communication, connection, sex, all those things within your marriage, I teach all that stuff in the book, everything we've learned from experts over the past 7 years. It's also divided up into being a father. So raising kids with patience, with grace, connecting with them, making memories with them, raising strong daughters, raising strong young men, rites of
Mm,
passage, how to build confidence, how to build self esteem, all these things about raising kids. And then the fourth one is leader. And there's 10 different tenets in there of leadership and how to basically lead
mm.
yourself, but also teach your kids how to be the next generation of strong leaders that we're going to have.
I love that.
Thank you.
I love that. Yeah, being able to help your kids do the same thing. I mean, that's the real measure of a man, right?
Yeah.
We talk about there are so many different things that we can do, but when we and our wives together can help have those strong kids go out and be successful, and when I say successful, we're saying have families of their own,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Children of their own, all those kinds, and also they can have the success in the world as well
Right.
with business and all of that. We want all of it, and that's what's so fun. The only way to do that is by connecting with our kids. And I love one of the things you say as I've seen some of your stuff over time. One of the things that I love that you talk about is building an epic connection with your
Yeah.
kids. I love the word. I mean, I love the word epic. I do. I love it. But building. So there's two things there. Epic connection, meaning just so huge, something that just can't be ignored, right there, amazing part of their lives. And then the building part, that you have to build it. So elaborate a little bit on that for me. Why you have build an epic connection with your kids is one of your major things you teach.
So epic has been a word that we use a lot in the brand, right? Because we don't want mediocre, right?
Mm-mm,
We want
no way.
we want awesome. Like right. We
Mm-hmm,
want it to be epic. And a lot of us just don't, and quite frankly, we don't have the skills or the know-how to build that connection with our kids. We have no clue how to do it. And that's not a dig on men, right? Because here's what I can tell
mm-mm,
you, the good news about men is we're seeing a generation of fathers right now that are raising their hands being like, I want this and I want it bad and I'm all in. I just don't know exactly what it looks like because, my dad raised me this way and his dad raised him this way, and that's fine. But what I can tell you is generations past, fathers did the best they could with what they had, and they were providers.
mm-hmm.
That was their identity. I mean, did they make memories? Sure, some did, right? And they did the best they could. But a lot of them just viewed themselves as like, well, I'm the provider and that's my job, right? Well, men of this
Yep,
generation are like, yeah, that's a part of my job. But a bigger part of my
exactly.
job is building this relationship, this connection, spending time with them. Like you see men today more hungry to hang out with their kids than I think ever before. Like they really want it.
Mm-hmm,
The problem, like I said, is like, well, what does that look like? Especially if I've never done this and I don't have training around it and I don't even know the skill sets. Like here's one skill set that we talk about all the time. Create an environment of psychological safety with your kids so they tell you anything. And guys are like, that
yeah,
sounds amazing, but how does that work? I was like, well, there's actually all kinds of different things you can do. So, like, for instance, if you want to build an epic connection with your kids, ask them 3 questions every day. And I'm happy to tell you what they are and give you the meaning behind all three. But what it does is it's such a simple but yet foundational thing. So the first question is, what was a high point moment for you today? Or what was something fantastic that happened to you today? Or what was something that you're
mm,
grateful for today? Or what's something that you brought you joy today? What that question does is when your kids get home from school, you usually ask, how was school? Do you have homework? How was your day? Right? Terrible questions
yep.
because you'll get one word answers. Good, fine, busy. I don't want to talk about it, that kind of thing. Right. But when you ask, like, tell me about a high point moment of your day, something that brought you a ton of joy, what you're doing is your kid now has to go think about, well, what happened in my day today? What was something that was
Mm,
really cool? You're actually putting them in a state of gratitude and they're sharing this gratitude with
mm,
you. The best thing you can do when someone shares gratitude with you is to validate those feelings, right? So, like, for instance, your kid might be like, Dad, I got a B on that science test. Man, I studied so hard for it. I can't believe I got a B. It was so amazing. Like I thought I was going to fail it, but I got to be. I was like, dude, that's amazing. Heck yeah. And you put in a lot of work, right? You put in a lot of work. You studied a ton. Yeah, good job, right? Validating those feelings. Now the kid's like, oh, like this is a good conversation. The second question is,
I want more
I
of
want more
this,
of this.
right?
Yeah. The second question
Yeah.
is, tell me something that you failed at today. Tell me something that was a
Mm,
challenge. Tell me something that was a low point. How did you get through it? So this is where this is one way to create psychological safety. When you have to tell someone about a very authentic or vulnerable part of your day, right? Or a day or a point in your day where you're like, yeah, this sucked for me today. I failed at this part of my day. That takes courage, number one. Number two,
Big
it
time.
could also be a growth mindset moment and a way to create psychological safety. And it's all in how we respond. So let's just say your kid comes home and it's the opposite. Dad, I got a D on that science test. Oh, okay. Well, tell me more about that. Now, in my dad mind, right, I'm sitting here already thinking, I told you to study for that test. I saw that you were,
What were you
yeah, I saw
doing?
you were on your phone last night. Like, and you were supposed to be studying. Like, did you not, what did you not understand? Right. There's that part of me that I want, but instead I'm like, oh, okay, tell me more about that. Notice I didn't use the word why. Why will put somebody on
Hmm.
the defense, right? Just take that three-letter word out of your vocabulary and instead tell me more. They'll give you the same reasonings, but they're going to feel really good about it. Yeah, I don't know, Dad. There was a few questions on the test that I wasn't really prepared for. Like I thought I knew it, but I guess I didn't. Okay, well, yeah. Well, let me ask you this: if you were to do the test over again and study for it and everything, is there anything you do different? And if so, what would it be? Yeah, I probably would have studied. I studied chapters 1, 2, and 3, but not 4, 5, and 6 very well. I probably should have put in more time. It's like, okay, cool. Great lesson. Great thing to learn. So, when's your next test? Well, it's actually next Friday. Okay, great. So, based on the information that you shared with me and some of the things you learned, what would you do different? Well, I probably study a little more. I would definitely study like all the material, not just half of it. Man, I think that's great. Great job.
Hmm.
So, how can I support you with that? Like, how can we make sure that that happens? What do you need me to do to help you? And they might be like, you know what, I'm good. Or just check in with me on Thursday night. Or can you help me study? Like something like that. But that's a way where your kid, they didn't get blasted, right, by you. I didn't
Exactly.
have to lecture. All I had to do is ask questions. And by asking questions, he articulated the beautiful answers and the connection. Our connection and our relationship was actually elevated and not, it did not, degenerate, right, because of that. Now, if I would have blasted him and just came in like a bull and been like, dude, I told you to study, man. Like you were on your phone. Like, what the heck? Like, come on. Like, get with the program, get your head right. Or I'll give you a
Hmm.
kick in the rear, right? Something like that. Now your kid's like, okay, great. Noted. I'm not telling you anything anymore. Thanks. Right.
Exactly. Because he already knows
Oh, yeah.
what he failed
Yeah.
at. I mean, he knows exactly what he should have done. He knew he was on his
Right.
phone. He's not, I mean, they can make those
They're
connections.
smarter than, yeah. And so, and the third question is, what are you most excited about tomorrow? And that is where you get your kid back into
Mm,
gratitude. But I call that question the Netflix to be continued question, because then you get a really good glimpse into their day tomorrow. So it's kind of like when, you
yeah.
know, right now I'm watching The Offer, which is a fantastic show. It's all about how The Godfather was made and how hard it was to actually make the movie and get it done and all that. It's fantastic. But they leave you hanging at the end of every episode, so you go watch the next episode. Well, that question
Exactly.
is that episode. It is that hook point. Because if you ask like, "Hey, what are you most excited about tomorrow?" Like, "Dad, I got my fitness test tomorrow." And I've been running the mile for a while. I'm like really excited about it because I think I'm going to run this mile faster than I ever have before. Man, that's amazing. So, what do you think I'm going to ask him about when I see him the very next day? Is that Netflix hook point to be continued? Hey, man, how did the run go? Right now, if what you're doing with that question, not only is it a great conversation starter, but you're sending a really powerful message to your kid that I listen to you,
Hmm.
I'm in your life, I know
Yes.
it's important to you, and I'm just as excited to hear about it as you're excited to tell me, right? So those three questions will create, believe it or not, an environment of
Mm,
psychological safety where suddenly your kid is just like, I don't know what it is about dad, but I feel really good talking to him. All my kids,
mm.
I'm bad at a lot. Communication is not one of them though. And my kids will all tell you, I love talking to my dad. Like my 16-year-old, his favorite two words every night, no matter how tired I am, is let's talk. He loves to still talk, which blows my mind because I'm like, you're a teenager and you're supposed to not want anything to do with me. But I think a
Yeah.
lot of it has to do with the fact that I've been doing those questions and been talking to him like that for years. So epic connection, that's just one way to do it. I talk about it in the book, but that I just wanted to make sure your listeners had something. So if you wanted like those three
Mm,
questions, go use those. They're gold.
I love that. Yeah, those three questions are powerful. Those questions are powerful, and I love, and they won't get stagnant either because we love talking to our
Yeah.
dads. We love connecting. Everyone loves to connect, and I love how how you were saying you can switch
Yeah.
them up in different ways and use them, and and the beauty of it is your kids have probably heard you talk about this kind of stuff. They probably know exactly what you're
Oh,
doing,
they do.
but it doesn't matter.
No,
It doesn't matter because the connection is still made,
yeah,
right?
they know exactly what those are, you know? I mean, and the funny thing is when your
Yeah.
kids get old enough, they start asking you those questions. Like, it's not uncommon.
Mhm.
Even my 8-year-old, "What was the best part of your day?" I'm like, "You little ninja."
Yeah.
That's so funny, right?
Yeah, it's like turn it back
Yeah,
on you,
yeah.
and basically they're reciprocating and building the connection back because they feel the love and they want to know
They
and they
do.
care, actually care.
Well, and one other thing
Yeah.
too is best lessons in life are caught, not taught, right? And I
Hmm.
have an app on my two older boys' phones called Bark. Bark is an app that
Yeah.
it runs in the background of their phone and it detects keywords around, suicidal ideations, depression,
Hmm.
anxiety, drug use, medically concerning content, adult searches on the internet, all these things, right? And it'll send me an alert.
Hmm.
Now it'll monitor like text messages and web searches and all this stuff. But what I pay a lot of attention to are the text messages between my boys and their friends or the girls that they date. And it's fascinating to me because like I'll see these girls like, like, oh my gosh, I had such a horrible day today and like it was so stressful. And my boys will be like, tell me more. I'm like, kind of like, look, you're like, holy crap, I can't believe my kids are communicating like this. Tell me more. I noticed, and I'll point it out to them, be like, hey, I got a bark alert. I saw this conversation. I was like, I just want to really acknowledge and appreciate something about you. Like, you use the invite of tell me more, to get more information. You didn't try to fix her problem. You weren't like her counselor. You just, through this text message, you used these words that you were listening, that you were engaged, and you were just creating space for her. And that's so meaningful to a woman. Like, don't solve her problems unless she wants you to, right? Listen to her, and you do such a
Hmm.
great job of that. And that it's a great learning moment for them.
That's so powerful. Like you said, that I love there is building that epic connection needs to happen once again with
Yeah.
us, with our children, them with us, and then when they get older, same thing. What are they going to reciprocate? What are they going to emulate? Is what they
Yeah.
learned growing up, and I love that they're going to be doing the same thing with their own kids and with their own wives and all other people in their life, like you're saying. It's a powerful thing to learn to communicate and genuinely
Yeah.
care about the people in your
Agreed.
life.
Totally agreed.
Yeah, that's so fun. I love it. I love it. Well, this is these are great things. These are great things. So, so your kids, how old is your oldest you said again?
16 and then 14, 8 and 6.
Okay.
All
I
boys.
love it. That's
It's
so
like the
fun. All
it's like the
boys.
it's like
Yeah,
the
I
fraternity party you never leave.
it's always
Always
happening.
going on.
Always happening. I love it. Yeah, so I grew up in a house with so I was the third of four
Really?
boys. And then at the very end, my we had my little sister. My parents had my little sister, so there's one girl at the end, and so four boys, and then one girl to keep us all in line,
So
and
funny.
so it was awesome. So yeah, so she had many protectors. So any boy that came by the house as she was getting older, yeah,
Went down.
she, yep, exactly. It's like you don't mess with my
You know what's so
sister.
funny and kind of
So
serendipitous is my son that came in and said hello to us before we started hitting record. He's my third born. So he's
oh,
he's
is he?
he's you in the mix. He's the third boy.
He's
Yeah.
me. He must be pretty
He's
amazing.
he's got he is like my heart and soul. Like I mean, they all are, but like he's at this, it's like I mean, when your kids are like 8, it's like this beautiful
Mhm.
sweet spot of an age. At least that's the way I've experienced it with my boys.
Yeah.
They're just old enough to where they interact and play, and they really know what's going on, and they're like their own like little bitty person, right? And then and he's like
Yes.
insanely affectionate. He's my wife calls him like the daddy's boy. He always wants me, and he just loves to hang out and talk and play video games and play catch and like he's at that age. And to be honest, now that I have two older ones, I embrace the heck out of that because I'm like these days are fleeting, right? And there are some days, man, where I'm just like, oh my god,
So
like I can't
fast.
even like keep my eyes open. Like 2 nights ago, I didn't tell you this before we hit record, but I was in the ER with my 14-year-old until 4 a.m. and basically
Oh
only
my
slept
goodness.
2 hours the night before last. And I was just absolutely smoked. yesterday, like so tired I couldn't eat. I didn't even know what to do with myself. And my 8-year-old and my 6-year-old love to brush teeth together. And this sounds like super stupid, right? I mean, like even as I say it, it's just dumb. Like, but
Yeah.
this is why I'm still the student, not the guru. So like, I'm helping them get ready last night. I am like dragging, like I'm a zombie. It's like 10 o'clock at night, 4th of July. I'm like, I'm asleep tonight with the fireworks and everything else. And they come in and they're like, and I'm already in bed, which is kind of abnormal. I always put them in bed. My wife did it last night. And they're like, "Hey dad, can we brush teeth with you?" And I'm like, "Buddy, I already brushed my teeth." I was like, "Dad's in bed. Like, I'm gonna go to bed." And he just like looked like I kicked him in the rear end as he walked out. And he was like, "Okay." And then he like turned around, put his head down. I'm like, "You know what? I could always brush my teeth again. Go grab your toothbrush." I was like, "We'll do it." And so he came back in and we brushed our teeth. And my wife goes, "God bless you, are such a sucker." I was like, "Well," I was like, this could be the last time he ever asked me to brush teeth with him. Like, I know this very well. Like, this could be the
Exactly.
night where I never get this invite again. So you just got to do
Mhm.
it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. There are all these little moments. It's funny. You wonder, like it's funny you say that. Like this might be the last time because like my oldest, she's almost 14. And I actually have 6 kids. I have 3 boys, 3 girls.
You're so
And
calm.
and oh yeah. Well, it's funny. Before I pressed record, so it's funny whenever I'm recording a podcast, I always have to warn
Uh,
everybody, "Okay, everybody, recording a podcast." And I used to say, "Hey, try and be quiet," something to that effect, but now we just say, "Go outside." Like everyone has to go outside because there is no quiet whatever's in the house. But I love it. That's
it
life.
is
Like
life.
that's what it's all about. And my oldest, that's what I was saying is my oldest, I just look sometimes and I think, how, how did she get so old? And there are some of these little things, right? Reading stories, wants to be tucked in at night and read stories or do this thing or that thing, and and I just keep thinking, when when did she stop asking for that? I didn't even realize it. When did she stop asking? When did this happen? And luckily, that's the benefit of having so many kids is I get lots of chances, right? I've messed it up plenty of time, not appreciated as much as I could, and now it's like, okay, let's appreciate it more and
Yeah, you
more.
gotta,
So
and I think that's a lot of people like when first of all, I would have never thought I had for myself. Right. And when you tell people, I mean, like, here's the funny thing. I don't know if you ever do this, but feel free to steal this because it's just funny. So
I
like there's like, you meet somebody new, they'd be like, "Oh, how many kids you guys have?" And when I say four, I say wow the same time they do. So like, wow. And I just say it at the same time. And then they're like, boys,
that's
girls. And
hilarious.
then I go, all boys. And then I do it again. Wow. Cause they both like, wow, like, it's like the wow. Like I've been dealing with the wows for like, all these years. And I had one guy who used to work for me. This is a long time. He's a very, very blunt dude from Michigan. And I told him like how many kids I had, and he's like, "Why?" It wasn't a wow, it was a why, which was really funny. But the funny thing is that I get it. When I had 2 boys, I was like, "Yeah, we're done. I ain't having any more kids. This is craziness." Right
Yeah,
now, I wouldn't have it any other way, and I wouldn't have it any other way because of the
exactly.
exact same reason you just said. Because what I've noticed with my two older boys, even like they kind of notice that I'm a bit more of a softie with the younger ones, and they're like,
Hmm.
"God bless, Dad. You were never." I was like, "I know." I was like, "Sorry." I was like, "You guys are the crash test dummies." Like pretty much.
Exactly.
You,
Guinea pigs.
yeah,
We'll take it.
like, and I always tell my oldest, I was like, "Yeah, you get the worst of it because I learned everything first with you." I was like, "So by the time I get to your next brother, like it's a little easier on them because I've messed up with you. So sorry for years. I'll put more money in your therapy fund." And we joke about it. He's
Exactly.
got a good sense of humor about it.
Oh, it's so fun
It
though
is.
because your older kids. That is the fun thing about having kids is kids being able to have
Yeah.
siblings. I think is a very amazing thing, and I think about my life and just what a wonderful thing it is to have my brothers, my sister, and just have that connection and so it's just one of those things that you can't replace. And And so it is funny though. I'm gonna have to steal your wow response, because you're right. When I say 6, they always say the exact
Wow.
same thing. Like I said, they've been saying it since
Yeah.
about 4. So you're right. Be like,
Wow.
wow. You're like, yes,
I want to normalize something here real quick about
please do.
just fatherhood in general. Um, there are going to be moments and seasons where things feel really great. And there's going to be moments and seasons that are
Yeah.
just a complete and utter mess, right? And one thing I'll tell you is a lot of men, we are our own worst critic. And the loudest voice
Mm,
in our heart and our mind is the voice that we use when we talk to ourselves when no one else is listening. And I was
mm,
talking about this with a bunch of my guys who are on our leadership team in Dad Edge Alliance Mastermind. That's our mastermind for dads. And we started talking
mm-hmm,
about like some of these guys because we have, sessions for them just for our leadership team where we feed them and make sure that they're good. And we had this conversation about these inner dialogues we have with men about how we're just absolutely, we don't give ourselves any grace. We beat ourselves up relentlessly, and the words and
mm,
we use and how we talk to ourselves is terrible sometimes. And I piped up on this leadership call and I was like, guys, let me ask you something. And one guy in particular I called out and I was like, what do you say to yourself? He's like, I'm always asking myself, am I worthy? Am I good enough? And,
yeah.
just life in general, like my job, my marriage, being
Mm-hmm,
being a man, being a father. And I looked at this man, I said, dude, let me ask you something. Christopher, his son, is 16. I said, if Christopher came to you and said, Dad, I don't know if I'm worthy or good enough, what would you say to him? He's like, oh my God. He's like,
mm,
son, no. Like I give him so much grace. Why would you think that? Man, you're amazing. You're this, you're that. Like,
mm,
of course not. Like, and I was like, that's what I was hoping you'd say. And that's what we all knew you would say. Why can't we ever speak uh, that way to ourselves? And that was like a conundrum that none of us could really answer. We're like, we don't know. Like, that's just the way men are. But here's what I'll tell you, there's going to be a lot of moments like last night with the teeth brushing thing. I didn't feel like doing it. Like I was tired. I
mm-mm,
was beside myself tired, only slept like 2 hours. And I was like, and I had every reason not to do it. Even my wife was like, yeah, like, don't do it. You're in bed. Whether you feel like doing whatever it is or not is irrelevant.
mm-hmm,
I will tell you one of the normal things to do is a lot of times, whatever it is that you have to go do or need to go do with your kids, you may or may not feel like doing it. In fact, you might be like, God bless, if one more person
mm,
asks me to do something today, I might shoot them at this point, right? But
mm-hmm,
if the
mm-hmm,
answer is like last night, I have zero regrets. Like today, God forbid if I were to, you know, go to the hospital for a heart attack and the doc said you're not going to make it for the next 24 hours, I would not regret for 1 second getting out of bed and brushing teeth with my kid for 4 minutes,
mm,
right? Like I would be like, the last thing my kid heard me say was yes, let's go do that. And
yeah.
so like that's what I want to tell men is that there's going to be a lot of times where you don't feel like brushing teeth, right? Or you don't feel like doing this, or you don't feel like doing that, or for the love of God, like I
Mm-hmm,
just can't. I've had a crazy day, I don't want to go play catch, or I don't want to play tea party with
yeah.
my daughter. But if you do it anyway,
Mm-hmm,
what I can tell you is that is going to make all the difference in the world. And a lot of times, whatever it is you're about ready to go do, once you're doing it for 20 seconds, you think it's great. It doesn't matter. So
yeah.
what I'll tell, just a lot of times you're not going to feel like doing it. Just do it anyway and just enjoy the results of that.
I love that, because what happens is it takes me back to when you met your dad again after when you were
Yeah.
30, right? After years, and you decided to
Yeah.
forget the past, right? And move forward. And what became of that? And what came of that now, right? And what's still coming of that in your relationship, right? It makes me think the same thing in life. So if you're one of the dads listening right now and you had a different experience yesterday where you didn't get out of bed or you didn't go throw the ball, forget about it, right? Forget about it. Give
Yeah.
yourself some grace, like Larry says here, and start doing it today.
Forget about it.
So forget about
Forget about
it.
it.
I like it. Well, Larry, I love this. This is great, great conversation. So as we come to a close here, one thing I love to ask at the end, and you've given so many great action steps already. So, but I love to ask all my guests, what's your top action step? What would you tell my listeners to do? as we leaving? If there's one thing they can do, what would you have
Yeah.
them
So,
do?
and is it okay if I kind of give a bit of a long answer to this? Okay. Because
Please,
I
please
think
do,
when,
please
we
do.
talked about fatherhood, right? But we didn't talk about marriage. And here's what I'll tell you.
Yes,
There's a
yes.
whole section in my new book on marriage, right? 80% is we've been doing
Mm-hmm.
Dad Edge Alliance now, which is our mastermind community for 6 years now. And in order to be a part of that
Mm-hmm.
group, you have to apply for it. So we see the applications come through, and we one of the questions is, what has your attention right now? What is it that you want to create, right? And there's 5 sections to that. There's, I want to optimize my physical, mental, emotional health. I want to create a better connection with my kids. I want to be more patient. I want to create a legendary marriage. 8 out of 10 men identify, I want to create a legendary marriage, who want to come do life with us in the alliance. So we know that there's a big that is on the mind and hearts of most men, is how do I connect with my wife, right? So Jessica
Mm-hmm.
and I have known each other for 25 years. We've been married for 19 as of next month, and we're in the best 5 years we've ever had, is the last 5 years. And you would think, like, knowing her 20 plus
Mm-hmm.
years, and you know sex and intimacy and conversation with somebody would get old over time. It doesn't, and it hasn't. It's only gotten better. But it's only gotten better because of the work that we've put in. And what I'll tell men, the next right thing
Mm-hmm.
is, you are married first and a parent second. A lot of people get that backwards. I'm a parent first and married second. If that's
Mm-hmm.
great, if you want to have a disconnected marriage that might end up in divorce. I'm not saying being a parent isn't noble and it's not necessary. It absolutely is. But you're married first, you're a parent second. And when I say parent second, I mean your kids come like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a priority under your wife. And of course, if somebody needs something
Mm-hmm.
urgently, yeah, you're not going to go out on a date night with your wife if your kid needs to go to the hospital, right?
Of course.
But what I will tell you is that, um, the next right thing, whether it's been 1 week or if it's been 5 years since you've taken your wife out on a date night, one of the easiest things to do to elevate your marriage
Mm-hmm.
is get in a cadence. And I'm not talking about every once in a while, a cadence of minimum every 2 weeks. You are taking your wife out on a date. It can be dinner. I never really encourage things like concerts or movies or anything like that, because you don't interact with each other. Do something that's an
Mm-hmm.
experience, like axe throwing or indoor rock climbing or something like that, or maybe yoga together, something like that, or dinner or whatever, or happy hour or whatever. But come to that date. Here's the thing. The next right thing is, come to that date as if it's your first date. I What
Mm-hmm.
I do is, I've been doing coaching for a long time, so I've got a long list of what I call generative questions. Which generative questions, I gave you 3 of them already, which was, we talked about that with kids, but
Mm-hmm.
you also can do that with your wife. But like, so for instance, what I'll do over dinner is I'll pick out 5 generative questions that are conversation starters for me and my wife. Like, so I'll give you an example of one we just did this past weekend. Tell me about a time when you were a kid and you experienced one of your most fondest memories. What was why did you choose that experience, and why was it so meaningful to you? So, like, what my wife has to do is she has to think about her time as a kid. She's like, oh my gosh, that's such a good question. When you do that, you're putting someone, when you ask somebody a question of like, hey, what does next week look like? They're just like, oh yeah. But if you put them in a conversation like that, to where they have to think about something, and story tell, the most important thing is story tell, and they're sharing it with you, that creates connection. That creates intimacy. And then how I respond to Jessica is also super important. I've got to be really engaged. Oh my gosh, like, yeah, I can understand, like, why that hike with your dad, where you guys went on this hike, and then you went fishing together, and you had this conversation, and I can understand why you chose that one. That's cool. That is super cool. What Tell me another one. What's another one, right? Being genuinely interested, because I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of times when we're married, we get kind of lazy and complacent, right? Or we're just tired, right?
Yep.
But go with the relationship like you always had. I love this quote from Tony Robbins, that if you treat the relationship like you did in the beginning, it won't have an end. And I think there's some truth to that,
Mm.
right? Um, my wife and I pursue the heck out of her. I date her. I'm purposely affectionate with my wife in front of my kids. I purposely compliment my wife in front of my kids, because I want them to see it. I want them to
Mm.
hear it. And when you love somebody and
Mm.
appreciate someone publicly, especially like if it's your wife in front of your kids, that makes her feel on top of the world. And the cool thing about that is, guys, you got to know this too. Your wife's 3 basic needs are to feel seen, to feel heard, and to feel safe. When she has those three basic needs fulfilled, she feels really good about the relationship, about her mentality, about you. It's a beautiful thing. And a lot of times men aren't the best listeners, so we don't hear them, right? I'm guilty of that as well. A lot of times the women are doing a lot of things that go unnoticed. Like maybe it's the grocery shopping, right? And they don't feel seen. If my wife goes grocery shopping, thank you so much for going to the grocery store. I can't even tell you how much I appreciate you grabbing this for me and that for Ethan. And thanks for always doing this. It's so helpful around here. And my wife will just perk up and be like, wow, thanks. That just made me feel on top of the world. And all I did was thank her for going grocery shopping. And safe is the other thing too. Safe is where if you ask your wife a question, she's venting, you don't have to fix her problem. In fact, you're actually going to make her feel safer if you just listen. If you just like, tell me more about that,
Mm-hmm.
or you label her emotions. Yeah, that sounds overwhelming. Who wouldn't be overwhelmed? That's a lot. Tell me more about that. How can I best support you? Because that's what makes her feel safe. As soon as you dive in and start telling her how and instructing her and advising her and coaching her on how to fix her problems, she doesn't feel so safe. She doesn't feel so seen and heard even anymore. She actually feels quite condescended. So those are just some simple tweaks that you can make in your marriage that are really, really going to elevate things. And by the way, the last thing I'll say is this. A lot of people feel really guilty of like, no, I'm a parent first. No, if you're a parent first and not married, then you're missing the mark, because what you're doing is you're basically sending a message to the kids. It's all about you. It's not about your mom. It's not about us. And they're going to watch a marriage either become stagnant, deteriorate, or not be really connected whatsoever. And what they're going to learn is, well, that's just what marriage is. Luckily, I had all these bad
Yep.
experiences with men in my life, but I had one really good one really, really, really game changing good one. And that was my grandfather. My grandfather lived a mile away from us. I spent a ton of time at my grandparents' house because my mom was kind of like in the dating world and all this other stuff. And my grandfather, I think, really took a lot of onus of like, this young man needs to see good. My grandfather
Yes.
loved my grandmother so much. And he was a blue collar, tough dude, but he was not afraid to show her affection, tell her how much he loved her, tell her how beautiful she was, hug her, kiss her. This is my queen. This is my lovely lady. Like, he was unfreaking believable at that. And that was an amazing thing to watch growing up because I got to see that. And I do that around my own kids. My own kids, like, they get grossed out, and I'm like, good, mission accomplished. My goal is to gross you out.
Exactly.
Right.
You won't forget
But
it.
that's what I'll say about marriage in general.
So good. So good. Wonderful. Wonderful actions and things we can do right now. And things that aren't difficult, but they're just
Yeah.
intentional, right? Just intentional. So wonderful. Well, Larry, what is the best way for people to connect with you? If they want to hear more about you and everything that, what's the best way to
I'm
connect with you?
not hard to find. You can find me on social, everywhere. At the Dad Edge. Instagram is at the Dad Edge. We have a page, the Dad Edge. If you want to find me on Facebook, I'm Larry Hagner on Facebook. There's not many people in the world with my name, which is a blessing. All of our resources are over at thedadedge.com. I've got one in particular, kind of like one I just talked about today. It's totally free, but it's called 25 Intimate Conversation Starters. And it's a quick video instructional. It's just me teaching you the psychology of why you need to ask what's called generative questions, intimate questions, and not like brainless questions like, how was your day? What's for dinner? How'd you sleep? Just stay away from those altogether. But if you go to thedadedge.com/25 questions, 25 questions, just put in your name and email, you'll get training and you'll get a PDF on 25 conversations that you can go have with your wife.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing so many great resources and sharing your story
Well,
with
thank
us
you for
today,
having
Larry.
me. This was awesome.
Fantastic. Well, everybody out there, thank you for joining us today. And we'll put links in the show notes to everything you heard today. And there are some wonderful things that we can act on today. So now it's your chance to go and be the unrivaled man in your life.